Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm just going to adjust my camera here. Noticed it was a little low. There we go. That's better. Um, my name is Jessie Haas. I am the Senior National Director of Programs at Pet Partners, and I am here to have a live with y'all today about volunteering with your pet. It always helps me when we first get started to have people pop in the chat, say hello, let me know you can hear me, that you can see everything okay. You should be able to see some slides. I also love hearing about where you're from. And if you have a pet, always nice to know what kind of pet it is. So whether it's a dog, cat, rabbit, guinea pig, bird, rat, um, any pet, I love to know what we've got out there because then I can speak a little bit about diverse species as I go through the rest of this live. Great. So I see Breeze here with her bunny Theo. Awesome. So I'm being heard just fine. As you continue to come in, please introduce yourself. It's always helpful to me. So again, my name is Jessie. I am the Senior National Director of Programs at Pet Partners. And this live is really designed, I would say, mostly for folks who are just beginning to consider pet partners and considering how to volunteer with your pet in a therapy animal setting. It can also be really helpful for folks who are maybe halfway through the process, but you want to know a little bit more about what's to come for you as you complete the process or as you become a registered volunteer. So that's really who the content is designed for. But I will say this, if you are a registered volunteer or you're somebody who knows Pet Partners really well, please stay and hang out. It's always nice to have you here. And folks with some experience can always type in the comments, when I'm talking, tell folks about how you experience that particular part of the process or how you experience volunteerism or visiting as a Pet Partners team. That's always really valuable for anybody else listening to the live. So I'm just going to hop over to the comments here. I see we've got more joiners. Hi, Angie from Oregon with the dog Ruby. And we've got a Cavapoo from Portland with Pam. Awesome. Somebody from Vermont. I actually used to live there. Love Vermont. Lily, a King Charles, Vicky with Gracie, a Weimaraner, and Melanie from California, a Bernese Retriever mix. We've got a lot of dogs up in here today, and that aligns pretty much with a lot of who our volunteer animals are, but we're actually going to talk about that in just a moment. So welcome. I am going to go ahead. Usually how I like to start this is to help you all understand what it is a Pet Partners volunteer does, what it looks like to be a volunteer alongside your pet, and just paint a picture for you. Because then it's really more helpful when I get to the portion of the presentation where I talk about what it is we look for in a handler and their animal, what it is we ask the handler and their animal to do before they become an official volunteer. Because until you sort of understand what it is you're doing, some of those requirements may not make as much sense. So we're going to kind of work in reverse order here. So we can go to the first slide. And I'm going to talk about where our therapy animal teams visit. And I think it's really important right off the bat to say when I mention teams, I am speaking of one handler plus one animal. You are a team together. We always like to recognize that when it comes to this type of volunteerism, the animal is no more important than the human. The human is no more important than the animal. You are a team together providing volunteer services. So where our teams go out on behalf of Pet Partners and share their time, share that healing power of the human-animal bond is in a variety of settings. I have some of the most common listed up on the screen, but this is not at all exhaustive. With over 7,000 volunteers in the United States, as you can imagine, there are so many different kinds of facilities where folks may go and volunteer. In these cases, these types of facilities are inviting our teams into their setting. They want you to interact with patients, clients, or students because there is a lot of evidence that this can help young children learn how to read better or faster. It can help people who might live in an isolated living environment have more social outlets. It can lead to reduced depression and so on and so on. So these facilities know that this is a benefit they can provide to people who may be at their facility. They want to partner with you as a volunteer to bring your pet into the facility. We can go to the next slide. So in terms of what a volunteer visit looks like with Pet Partners, again, This can be quite diverse, and different teams will do different things in different settings, but I just want to highlight a few of our most common. So a lot of visits are what we would call social visits, and that is not to make it sound necessarily casual. Social can be casual, but also they can be very impactful. So imagine a situation where you are visiting a housing facility for senior citizens. Some of those folks may not have any family nearby, or they may only have visits occasionally from family. You become something with your pet that they look forward to each week, as part of reducing that isolation, reducing that loneliness, giving them an outlet to. We also have teams who participate in physical or occupational therapy settings. So what this might look like, as an example, is you may go with your cat to a rehab facility where somebody is receiving therapy. And you may pair up or be paired up with a physical therapist who might be helping a patient regain or practice fine motor skills after an accident. And they want you and your cat to be present for that. And in petting your cat or in brushing your cat, that patient is practicing some of the skills that the therapist wants them to practice. So you're partnering with somebody in more of a professional setting. They're responsible for the patient, you're responsible for your pet, but together you can make that experience for the patient, all the better. A lot of our teams participate in reading programs. We have an initiative called Read With Me that is all about having usually early or young readers, although it can sometimes be older readers or less traditional learning readers, read to your pet. Pets can be obviously very non-judgmental. So when somebody is practicing their oral reading or their verbal reading, they get a chance to practice it with a pet. It can also be very, very motivating. Somebody who may not necessarily love to practice their reading suddenly get to do it with a really cute rabbit, and that is a huge motivation for those individuals to practice their reading. There have been, a lot of studies and a lot of research to support the effectiveness of animals being present in a reading session. They are more effective than reading sessions that might only include a human. Another really common type of visit is stress breaks. So we see these happen at airports, universities and colleges during finals week or exam week. This is an opportunity for somebody to have their stress lowered by even briefly interacting with your pet. So again, this is just some common ways that visits play out. So I've given you the environments where they happen. This is what they might look like when you're there. And we can go to the next slide. Really important to note that we don't only register dogs. So I'm going to scroll through here again. It looks like just about everybody. Oh, no, we have a mini horse from Alberta. Great. So I think a lot of people tend to think of therapy animals as dogs only, but Pet Partners actually registers 9 other species. So while most of you are dog owners, keep this in mind for the other pet owners in your life that we know non-canines can make just as much of an impact as dogs when it comes to some of the therapy animal visitations I was just talking about, or the settings I was just talking about. And there are times where a non-dog is preferred. There may be individuals who are fearful of dogs, who are allergic to dogs, and it can be really exciting for them to interact with a therapy animal who isn't a dog. So I just wanted to take a moment to mention that not all teams look the same. So we can go to the next slide. No matter what type of animal you visit with, you're probably wondering, what is my commitment as a volunteer with Pet Partners? If you listen to me today, you're really excited about joining us. You may still want to know, what we ask of you. So you get to arrange your visits yourself. So you can decide what type of facility you go to. Pet Partners does help facilitate this in that once you have an account with us and you're registered, you're able to go out there and visit on our behalf. You can use a directory. It's called the Volunteer Opportunities Directory that exists in your online account. It knows where you live, and it will say, hey, in your area, there are 29 facilities looking for a Pet Partners team or teams to come in and visit. So you certainly can use that directory. But in other cases, volunteers might have a facility in mind that they really want to go to. This might be because they know other therapy animal volunteers in their area and they want to go where those volunteers are going. That's totally fine. We also see a lot that individuals want to go to the school where their child goes to school or their niece or nephew, or they want to go to the hospice facility where perhaps they have had a family member cared for in the past. So people can have personal connections to these facilities and want to bring their pet there. And that is totally up to you to do that. You can absolutely arrange those visits yourself with facilities, even if they are not listed in our directory. Our directory is just one place that you can go to find out about visits. In terms of the time commitment, that's up to you as well. A lot of our volunteers go to one facility a week or maybe a few a month. No visit can be longer than 2 hours. That is a requirement on our behalf because even those of you who have young, energetic dogs who just love to interact with people, therapy animal visitation is tiring. And we always want to keep in mind that therapy animals are not working animals. We do not want to overtax them. We do not want to fatigue them. The majority of animals will be fatigued at 2 hours. So we give that limit of 2 hours per day. So that's why a lot of volunteers will say, well, I'm going to go to this facility once a week for 2 hours or a couple of times a month for 2 hours. You certainly can go to more than one facility if you want. So some people will go every other week at a school and then every other week at a hospital. That's really up to you. It is important to keep in mind that there's some kind of pre-visit and post-visit time. So you've got to make sure your animal is well groomed, that it's smelling fresh, that it's been brushed before a visit. So that's something to account for with your time commitment, of course, commuting to the facility as well. And then after a visit, your animal's not going to want to go rush off on errands. They aren't necessarily going to want to go to the dog park. They usually need some time to unwind. So factoring that into the days that you visit as well. So that is just a broad overview of what your commitment is. And we're going to go to the next slide. And at this point, what I want to talk about is your animal eligible? Are you a good fit as a human for this volunteerism? And then what do you need to do to become a volunteer? So I've covered at this point what the volunteerism looks like. Let's now get to what it takes to get to that volunteerism. But I am just going to pause and just check comments while you all look at this slide. I want to make sure that there are no questions coming in. I do see one question from Nicole here about evaluations. Nicole, I'm going to address evaluations in just a moment. And so I'll hit your question at that point in time. So in terms of eligibility, these are the things you're going to want to ask yourself about your animal. So in terms of age requirements, all animals who are considered pocket pets, so that's rabbits, guinea pigs, and rats. We don't have any of those, but if you did, it's 6 months old. All other animals must be at least 1 year old. That doesn't mean you can't start before your animal turns 1 year in terms of getting the process started. You can start an account with us. You can take your required handler training, which we'll talk about in just a moment, but you cannot actually go and get your animal evaluated and begin visiting until they are over 1 year old. Birds must have lived with the owner for at least a year. All other animals must have lived with the owner for at least 6 months. So this means if you adopted a 3-year-old cat, your cat meets the age requirement, but until they've been in your home for 6 months, they wouldn't meet a requirement. And the reason for that is because when you bring an animal into your home, it takes some time for you to develop a bond, for them to understand you, for you to understand them. What are your animal's likes and dislikes? So we want to make sure you've got that living together vibe all sorted out before you get started with pet partners. Animals must be reliably house trained. So most of you all have dogs, you know what that looks like. But that goes for all other species as well. They must be house trained with the exception of birds who can wear flight suits. All animals must be on a leash at all times, and they must be reliable and predictable and manageable on a leash. We always want animals to be calm on the leash, not be stressing or straining against it. That's mostly because remember, you're possibly going to be visiting with vulnerable clients, patients, or students, maybe people who are small, like children. An animal who is not manageable on a leash doesn't give a great impression of safety. So you have to make sure your animal can be leashed and does well on a leash, and leash rules apply for all species. So that's important to keep in mind. We don't allow animals with any history of aggression, whether that be towards people or towards other animals. And then we always want to make sure our animals are healthy. So that goes back to what I said earlier, that these are not working animals. They are family pets. We don't want to be putting family pets into a situation where something would make them uncomfortable. So I always want to make sure an animal is healthy. Um, but when we talk about health, that doesn't mean that your animal can't take any medications or can't have any disabilities. In fact, we have animals who do have disabilities. We have animals who do have chronic health issues that are managed by medication. The biggest question is, are they comfortable? Does going out into a therapy animal visitation setting increase their pain or discomfort in any way? That's really what we're looking for with healthy. If your animal does take a medication, I highly recommend that you just email us. And at the bottom of every page on our website, we have a contact us button. Um, and you can use that, and that gets an email to us. Let us know what the medication is, because there are some medications that are banned by pet partners for various different reasons that I don't have time to get into today. But it's always good to just ask us first before you get too far along in the process and then realize that your animal's medication is not allowed in the program. And then your animal needs to have some basic obedience skills that are species appropriate, right? That's going to look different if you have a dog versus whether you have um, a rabbit, for example. So we're going to go to the next slide. We'll talk about obedience a little bit more. Oh, good call, Angie. I don't think I talked about diet. That might have been a bullet and I skipped right over it. But animals cannot be fed a raw protein diet. That is mainly what we're saying there. And that's for infection prevention and control reasons, in terms of some increased infections that can occur in animals who have been fed a raw diet. So if you feed your animal a raw diet and you have questions about that, you certainly can email us. We have a lot of literature and information about this. Just to be clear, we don't think raw diets are necessarily bad. If that's what's right for your pet, then absolutely you should be feeding them that if that's recommended by your vet. We are not here to recommend or not recommend a certain diet, but when it comes to going into facilities where there may be immunocompromised people, that's where a raw diet is not a fit, just for our program itself. Thank you, Angie, for keeping me on track. I appreciate that. So those are the requirements, but let's talk about kind of level 2. What does it take to be a successful therapy animal? So obedience skills, that was the last bullet on the previous slide. So I'll just cover that first. We are not looking for obedience stars here. We're not looking for a dog who could compete in an obedience show, but they do need to have good basic obedience skills. And that goes for all different species. So same as we want to have a dog who can reliably sit in order to demonstrate that the animal can remain under control, can follow command. That's really important. For a horse, that may not be sit, of course, but we are going to be looking for the same thing. Can your animal stand still when you ask it to? Things like that. And again, this is mostly for safety, and it's also to communicate safety to the people you're visiting with, that they can see that you as a handler have an obedient animal who will listen to you. That can inspire a lot of confidence in you as a team when you're moving through a facility. Therapy animals must also be people-oriented, sociable, and friendly. I always like to put a big caveat here. That means with strangers. So I have had dogs before, including the one I have now. She's not a therapy animal because she is people-oriented, she is sociable, she is friendly, but certain kinds of strangers or strange environments can throw her off, and she will kind of retreat into her shell. So it's not just about, does your dog like your family? Does your dog like people who are regularly in your house? Does your dog like the neighborhood? It's, does your dog like a wide variety of people who are strange to them? And can they kind of maintain that sociable nature even in an environment that isn't familiar to them? If any of you ever noticed, if you take your dog sometimes into a place that's overwhelming, they aren't as sociable. And I want to be really clear when I say all of this. We're looking for an animal who's people-oriented, sociable, and friendly most of the time. Even our most experienced therapy animals will at times be like, I don't feel like being sociable right now. This situation isn't making me feel comfortable. You as a handler, as long as you can identify that, remove your animal from the situation, give them a break, all good. But we want their general orientation to be towards that sociable nature. We want animals that can remain calm and are comfortable being touched by others. So the calm is an important thing here. There are a lot of animals who just love people, but they can't remain calm when they're near people. Those of you who have young dogs, I'm looking at some of the breeds here. Either your animal might be like that now or they were in the past where like they're just so excited to be around people. We need them to have that calmness come into play before they would be a successful therapy animal. Some of this can be done by a training. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time, but that calmness is very important. And of course, non-aggressive towards animals and people. The animal part we bring up because in almost all types of facilities now, you are going to encounter at least other dogs. Okay, whether that's assistance animals, other therapy animals. Lots of places allow maybe personal pet visits. I know that's the case at some nursing care facilities for older adults. Pets may not be able to live there, but pets can visit. So we need to make sure that your animal is also not aggressive towards other animals. So we're going to go to the next slide. All right, the human end of the leash. This is actually my favorite part to talk about because when you think about going on a visit, yes, we're looking for things in your animal, but ultimately how the interaction with the client, patient, or student goes is really up to you. And so it is always you are 50% of the team. And you'll find this out in just a moment when I talk about how we evaluate you. We are looking at you as the handler as much as we are looking at your animal before we register and insure you to go out into facilities. So, of course, you need to be friendly, professional, and polite. You need to feel comfortable interacting with a wide range of people and strangers because, yes, they'll want to pet your dog, but they're going to want to chat with you in most cases. We want handlers who can predict and redirect their animal's behavior. So I just mentioned earlier that even our most experienced therapy animals, they sometimes are stressed out. They sometimes don't like the interaction that's going on. We want you as a handler to see that before it comes as much as possible. So, okay, I notice somebody's coming down the hallway or there's a large group coming down the hallway. I know my dog prefers to be pet one by one. I can predict that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my animal up for success here by having this group not all crowd around my animal, but instead pet one at a time. That's the kind of thing that we're looking for in handlers. You know your animal, you've got to bond with them, and you can predict their behavior and redirect it or just make the situation better for them before you even have to redirect their behavior. When you are in a visitation setting, your number one priority is your animal's well-being. It is not the client, patient, or student. So you may be in a situation where you're reading with a lovely child who just does not want your pet to leave, but maybe they're not petting your animal in a nice way and you're trying to redirect it. The kid isn't listening. Your responsibility is not to that kid. Your responsibility is to your animal. You get up and you move. You remove your animal from the situation. That can be a hard thing for people to do because they obviously want to bring joy to the people they're visiting, but your number one priority is always your animal's well-being. And that's not just because we care about our animals, it's also for safety because an animal who is having an interaction that they don't like and are being forced to be in that situation over and over again, that's when negative things can happen. And of course, uh, handlers must follow pet partners' policies and procedures. We have a manual for you all when you become a handler that you do need to know and understand. One of the policies I already mentioned is that 2-hour visit rule. So handlers cannot be going beyond that, even if they want to. Handlers must always keep their pets on leash. These are the types of policies I'm talking about. And you do need to follow them to remain in good standing. When you follow our policies, then our insurance is in play. If you ignore our policies when you're out on a visit, then our insurance comes out of play. So policies and procedures are very important. We can go to the next slide. So these are the steps to becoming a registered Pet Partners Therapy Animal Team. Step one, if you haven't done it yet and you're on this live, you can go to the Pet Partners website. You can start a volunteer center account. It's a tab right at the top. And you can launch your registration. That's always the first step. And you'll find that once you launch that registration and you have an account, you can kind of start poking around things a little bit more, learn more about Pet Partners, learn more about what it's like to be a team, the services we offer. So I would recommend taking care of that step ASAP, even if you don't think you're going to register anytime real soon. Step 2 is to take our required handlers course. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide, so we'll set that one aside. You do need to go to your veterinarian and have them complete a house screening form. And then you need to pass a team evaluation as well, which I'm also going to talk about on a later slide. So it's really steps 2 and 4 here that I'm going to focus on, just because we have limited time and that's what most people want to know about. In addition to these steps, there are some other paperwork items, like you have to submit to a background check. You need to give us a photo because you'll eventually get a badge, but these are sort of the ones that take some time and effort. So we'll go to the next slide and we'll talk about the handlers course, or the handler training. So I've mentioned this already a couple of times, that we believe handlers are as important as animals when it comes to therapy animal volunteerism. So we require that all new handlers take a course. And in this course, you will learn all those policies and procedures I just mentioned, or at least gave a sample of them. You will also learn about things like how to end a visit when it's not going well. I also just talked about that in terms of always having your animal's well-being in mind. So the course covers all of those things. It also talks about, you know, how to have successful interactions, how to make the interaction between your animal and a client, patient, or student even more effective. The handler training can be done online as a course that takes about 4 hours or so, and you can come to it and leave it. You can do an hour today and an hour tomorrow, kind of saves your work as you go along. Also, we have this offered as an in-person option as well in some geographic areas. Not everybody has a licensed instructor nearby where they could take this course in person, but you certainly could look if the in-person option is more appealing to you. It is longer. It tends to take a little bit more, like 6 or 7 hours. It has to be done in one sitting, right? So you go one day for a full day. So that's sort of the inconvenient element of it. But the benefit of doing it in person is obviously you get to engage with other people. You get to engage with an instructor who's been a volunteer for a long time. So it really comes down to sort of what you prefer. You cannot go any further in the process of becoming a team in terms of getting evaluated until you complete the training. So the training has to be done before the evaluation occurs. Yes, Christy, there is a cost to this course. It's $70 to take this course. That is if you take the online option. If you have an option in person, costs can range because instructors are allowed to charge enough to cover their costs. So if they had to pay $200 to reserve the room and they've got 4 handlers in the room, then they can charge $50. So it'll just be different, but some instructors are able to offer it for free. They're able to run it all on donation. So if you do the in-person, it'll vary. If you do the online, it's $70. Great question. Let's go to the next slide and talk about the team evaluation. So as I said, you have to do the handlers course, then you can do the evaluation. The other steps of the registration, like I said, you can sort of do in your own time. But course first, evaluation second. This is where you and your animal come in front of a licensed team evaluator. And they are going to run you through approximately 20 exercises. It varies a little bit based on species. That is taking a look at your obedience skills, as well as what we call aptitude. The aptitude exercises are moving you through some simulations of what you might see on a therapy animal visit. So your animal will be approached by somebody who's using a piece of medical equipment like a walker or a wheelchair. What our evaluator is looking for there is that your animal isn't fearful of something on wheels. Some animals are, that it's not afraid to approach people who are using medical equipment. So that's an example of an aptitude exercise. Another one is we'll make a very loud, startling noise in the evaluation room. We want to see how your animal responds. It's okay for them to respond. Most animals don't love startling noises. What we want to see is that they can recover and that it doesn't really phase them long term. Throughout the entire evaluation, whether you're looking at some of those obedience exercises like come when called or stay in place, and when we're looking at aptitude, we are looking at you as a handler throughout in terms of how you support your animal and how you are as a handler. So when that loud noise happens, we're looking for you to maybe place a hand on your dog's head or to give a reassuring word to your cat, right? What that tells us is you can see something stress your animal and you are going to help bring their stress level down. So again, it's 50% animal, 50% handler when it comes to this evaluation. So I'm going to stop there on evaluation. I'm actually just going to loop back because I can see some questions are coming through. We don't have to move slides. We can leave it on this one about training for the animal. And I skipped right over that. So we focus on training for the handler. We do not focus on training for the animal. There's a couple reasons for that. We have 9 species. If we said everybody must take a dog obedience class or everybody must pass the canine good citizen test before they can become a team, that llama on your screen wouldn't have any avenue to becoming a team. So we don't dictate what you do to train your animal. We believe that's up to you. The other reason we like to leave it up to you is because animals enter this at all different phases of life and with different personalities and needs. So what an 18-month-old golden retriever might benefit from is heavy focus on obedience, remaining calm when distracted, remaining calm when they're so excited to meet a new person. That might be what that handler needs to work on with their dog versus somebody who has a Bernese Mountain Dog or a Newfoundland who might be 4 or 5 years old. Very different things that they might need to be focusing on with training before they become a team. So ultimately, what we recommend is take the handler's course. Once you take the handler's course and you kind of review materials on our website, you'll have a really good idea in terms of what we look for in a team when they evaluate and what we look for in a team when they're out visiting. Once you know what we're looking for, then you can decide the best way to train your animal regardless of species. So how you train your animal is up to you, but we're going to train you as the handler, if that makes good sense. So Ashley, I hope that answered your question. We do not require the CGC or the Canine Good Citizen for folks who don't know that. If you have done the CGC or you want to do that, maybe that's another goal of yours. It's absolutely wonderful preparation for being a therapy animal. So I can't say we recommend it, but it's certainly a wonderful supplemental option. All right, let's see what our last slide says here. And we're right at about 30 minutes. And I want to keep answering questions, so I certainly can hang around, but I know this was only scheduled for a half hour. So if you've got to hop off, that's totally okay with me. So benefits of a Pet Partners registration, they are up there on your screen. The big one is the first one, liability insurance. So there is virtually no facility, no hospital, no school, no airport, no nursing care facility, rehab facility who will allow an animal into their facility without insurance. And Pet Partners provides that insurance. I know there's often a question of why do I have to pay to be a Pet Partners volunteer? Some of that is to cover insurance costs. In fact, it costs us more to support you and provide insurance than it does that we cost in registration fees. Our generous donors cover the difference. But liability insurance is a big one. It's a big expense, and it's something that facilities want and that we are so pleased to offer to our teams. And it's really one of the primary benefits, but some of the other ones are listed up there as well. So I'm going to stop there. I think I covered everything I wanted to. If you still have time, hang out. I'm going to answer some questions that are coming in. Type in more. So Michelle asked here, can you retake the test? So the evaluation with you and your animal? Absolutely, yes. About 23% of teams who are coming for their evaluation for the first time will receive what we call a not ready score. Notice that it's not called failed, it's called not ready. And that just means on that day during that evaluation, you didn't show the necessary skills and aptitude to register you that day. But the majority of those teams who get that NR score will go on and try again, and then they'll pass. Some will, of course, get the NR and realize, well, this just turns out this is not for me. My pet didn't like that at all, and they might not try again. But those who do try again often have a lot of success on their second evaluation, usually because there's a lot of nerves the first time, and that can make things just not feel great for both the handler and the animal. There can also be just simple mistakes because maybe you didn't understand something. And so when you come back the second time, those nerves and those simple mistakes are sort of out of the way. I think there's a lot of handlers, if I'm being transparent, who kind of come in and think, my dog is the friendliest dog in the world. Of course, we're going to pass this evaluation. And they aren't really thinking that there is structure and there are standards here. And they learn that pretty quickly and come back and are able to work within that structure. And then a lot will NR because the handler thinks it's not about them. So they will hold their dog out there on the leash, let the evaluator do whatever, and they aren't being an active participant in what's going on. And we'll see a lot of NRs for that, but you can absolutely retake it. Somebody asked here, can you do the evaluation before you've owned your pet for 6 months? No, you cannot. You have to have the animal in your home for 6 months. What you can do is take the course before that point in time. You can start your registration, you can visit your vet, you can take the course, but you cannot evaluate until they've lived with you for 6 months or until you've known them. So there are situations like my dad is actually registered with his dog. If I wanted to register with her, I could also do that as a handler because I know her very well. So it doesn't have to be an animal who lives with you, but you do need to have known them for at least 6 months. Is there a time limit between the handler's class and getting certified? So no, there's not like a strict timeline. You have to take the handler's course, then you have to take the evaluation, then you have to, submit proof of evaluation, right? And then you can be registered. Some people can do all of those things in like 2 to 4 weeks. For a lot of people, they'll take the course, they'll absorb the information. They might take a month or two to like brush up on skills or just make sure they feel really ready for that evaluation. Then they'll take the evaluation and then they'll register. For some people, it's a 3 or 4 month long process. It's really up to you. It also depends on, and this question came up before, evaluation availability in your area. So in some places, there might be only 4 evaluations offered a year. If you live in a really rural area, you may actually need to travel to an evaluation to make it happen. So factor that in as well. You might start the whole process with us and say, I'm going to sign up for an evaluation now because the first evaluation in my area is until June. So I'm going to sign up for that and then I'll get all my requirements done before that evaluation day. So that's also a way to kind of work your timeline. I don't know if I answered your question, but there isn't a time limit. I suppose the one I could mention, this rarely happens. If you take the handler's course and then wait a full 2 years to be evaluated, you may have to retake the course. But anything within, 2 weeks to a year for some people is a really normal timeline to get everything done. I would say the sweet spot really is 2 or 3 months. I think if you wait too long, you just keep kind of putting it off and it gets harder and harder to complete it. But I also don't think you have to do it in like lightning speed 2 weeks either. Most people don't. For animals that are traditionally not house trained, horses, llamas, what are the expectations? Could they have something on them or have their owner carry something? No, we don't allow waste collection devices, is what we call those things. We do have some information if you go to the resource library, which lives in our volunteer center. So start an account. Then you have a volunteer center account. We have a big tab that says resources. And you can go to that resources tab and type in whatever you want and search. So you could type horse, you could type potty training, and you can get some more information on that. Of course, Google is your friend as well. Lots of people have potty trained, less commonly potty trained animals with some success, but you cannot use waste collection devices. The only exception is a flight suit for a bird. And I don't believe in any birds on this call. How do we find evaluations in our area? So again, if you go to your volunteer center account, there's a big box that says My Registrations, and that's where you will start your registration and where you will manage all of these steps. You get to self-manage it throughout the process. One of those steps is evaluation. When you click on that, it will take you to a calendar of events, of evaluation events, and you can search for your location and convenience to you, location, timing, all of that you can find in the calendar. If you really cannot find anything in your area, please don't be discouraged. Contact us. We can often help you out, or we will at least try. But a calendar is your first stop. If you're in a major metro area, you'll probably do okay finding an evaluation. It may not be next weekend. You may have to be flexible and be willing to wait a month or two because you got to keep in mind our evaluators are volunteers as well. They aren't paid for this role, so they do it when they're able to do it. There's a question here about raw or partially raw diet. Can we volunteer in certain places or not volunteer at all? So it's not volunteer at all. So no animals on a primarily raw diet can volunteer at all. There are some small exceptions like freeze-dried snacks and things like that. We do, again, have information in that resource library. If you start an account, you can type in raw diet. It will tell you some of these limited exceptions. But the raw diet applies to all facilities where animals would go. I think I answered everything, and I am 10 minutes over my time, but I hope that me getting to those questions was helpful. My email address is right here on the screen. I am happy to take direct emails. If I don't respond to you, I will make sure one of my teammates, colleagues do respond to you. So if I didn't get to anything today or you want some clarifications, absolutely email us. That's why we hold these sessions. We want to know who y'all are and how we can help you get through this process. So with that, I will sign off, say goodbye, and thank you so much for your time and joining me today. We hope to see you as a Pet Partners volunteer very soon. Thanks so much.